SpongeBob SquarePants is a billion-dollar franchise seen in nearly every country on Earth. But before the merchandise, the movies, and the fame, there was a quiet marine biologist named Stephen Hillenburg, a hand-drawn teaching comic, and a character called Bob the Sponge. What followed is a story of creative triumph and devastating loss, and it all started with a boy on the California coast and Jacques Cousteau on a television screen. Salt air drifts through the canyons and tide pools of Southern California, where a quiet boy named Stephen Hillenburg finds himself drawn to the water again and again. On weekends, his family drives from their new home in Anaheim to the rocky stretches of Laguna Beach, a world away from the inland sprawl. Here, the ocean is more than scenery. It is alive, teeming with color, movement, and mystery. Stephen stands ankle-deep in the surf at Woods Cove, eyes fixed on the shifting patterns of sea stars and anemones clinging to the rocks. At 15, he slips on a snorkel mask for the first time, the Pacific swirling around him, sunlight rippling across the sand below. The sensation is electric, as if a secret doorway has opened beneath the waves. Back at home, another world flickers on the television screen. Jacques Cousteau's documentaries, broadcast throughout the 1970s and the early 1980s, introduced Stephen to the language of marine science, the strange names, the careful observation, the sense that every tide pool is its own universe. Cousteau's voice, calm and precise, describes creatures that Stephen has glimpsed with his own eyes. The ocean is not just a playground, but a puzzle to be solved, a story to be told. Long before any thoughts of animation or fame, these early encounters leave their mark. The sea becomes both a refuge and a challenge, calling him back with questions that will shape the course of his life. Stephen Hillenburg chose Humboldt State University for its hands-on marine biology program and wild, windswept coastline. He graduated in 1984 with a degree in natural resource planning and interpretation, specializing in marine science. The curriculum was rigorous. Fieldwork in tide pools, lab studies of invertebrates, and long hours cataloging sea life along the Northern California shore were central to the program. But even as he logged specimens and wrote research briefs, Stephen found himself sketching creatures in the margins of his notebooks, searching for ways to capture what made them so strange and funny. After Humboldt, he moved south to the Ocean Institute in Dana Point, where he taught marine biology to school children. The job required more than just knowledge, it demanded imagination. Stephen developed interactive lessons, bringing kids face-to-face with starfish and sea cucumbers, translating complex science into stories they could remember. He wanted his students to see the ocean's characters as he did, not just as facts, but as personalities. To help his classes visualize tide pool life, he created a hand-drawn comic pamphlet called The Intertidal Zone. The comic starred Bob the Sponge, a porous, lumpy creature who introduced readers to his friends, crabs, sea stars, and anemones, each with their own quirks and scientific facts. The pamphlet, first distributed in the fall of 1989, blended humor with real biology, becoming a favorite teaching aid. Students remembered the jokes and the oddball characters long after the science lesson ended. In those photocopied pages, Stephen discovered that his passion for the ocean and his love of drawing could meet in a single joyful experiment. The Intertidal Zone did not just teach kids about tide pools, it planted the seed for something much bigger, waiting just below the surface. Stephen arrived at Cal Arts in 1989 carrying a sketchbook filled with tide pool creatures and a mind trained on scientific detail. The transition from scientific illustration to animation was not automatic. In the Cal Arts character animation program, he learned to break movement into its simplest forms: arcs, squash and stretch, and anticipation. Each lesson pushed him to see that clarity mattered more than complexity. Mentor Joe Ranft drilled a mantra into his students: simplify for readability. If a character's silhouette was not instantly recognizable, the joke or emotion could be lost in a single frame. Stephen's early shorts, like Wormholes and the Jackalope Adventure, stood out at student festivals, earning Best Student Animation Awards at the Los Angeles International Student Film Festival. His films combined the oddball logic of underwater life with a precise visual rhythm, catching the attention of visiting industry professionals. The Cal Arts curriculum demanded rigorous storyboarding, color theory, and the discipline to finish what you started. For Stephen, the challenge was to translate the weird, wonderful energy of a tide pool into the language of television, where every gesture needed to read instantly and every character had to pop against a crowded background. By the time he graduated, Stephen had built a technical foundation that merged his scientist's eye for detail with an animator's instinct for clarity. The skills he honed at CalArts would soon open the door to his first industry job, setting him on the path from classroom comics to the wild world of television animation. In 1993, Stephen Hillenburg joined the crew of Rocko's Modern Life, stepping into the unpredictable world of network animation. The job was a turning point. Here, surrounded by artists like Joe Murray and writer Martin Olson, Stephen found the freedom to experiment with characters that felt both strange and true. The chaotic energy of the Rocko studio fueled his imagination, and so did memories from earlier years spent working kitchen shifts in Maine. Those long days as a fry cook and lobster boiler left their mark, giving rise to the crusty, penny-pinching Mr. Krabs, a tribute to the tough but good-humored seafood bosses he had known. As production deadlines loomed, Stephen kept sketching in the margins of scripts and storyboards. His old classroom Sponge, once lumpy and brown, started to take on a new life. By 1994, he had squared the character's shape for clarity on screen, trading scientific accuracy for a bold, geometric outline. The kitchen sponge look made the character instantly readable, and the bright yellow color popped against underwater backdrops. The name SpongeBob replaced the original SpongeBoy after a trademark check, and the gap-toothed smile was borrowed from Stephen's own childhood grin. Details from his real life kept filtering in. The computer Karen, Plankton's ever-patient wife, was named as a quiet tribute to Stephen's own wife, Karen Umland, a gesture confirmed in production memos and interviews. By the time he married Karen in 1998, the world of Bikini Bottom was nearly complete. The finished cast, shaped by science, memory, and affection, was ready for its first pitch to Nickelodeon. SpongeBob SquarePants burst onto television screens in May 1999, and almost overnight, Stephen Hillenburg's oddball vision swept the globe. The pilot's offbeat humor and vibrant underwater world struck a chord far beyond its Saturday morning slot. By the end of its first year, SpongeBob was Nickelodeon's highest-rated show, drawing millions of viewers from kids and adults alike. The series racked up industry accolades, Annie Awards, Kids' Choice trophies, and an Emmy nomination, all within its first few seasons. But the real measure was cultural saturation. SpongeBob's face appeared on lunchboxes, memes, and Halloween costumes from Tokyo to Buenos Aires. In 2004, Hillenburg directed the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, which opened to packed theaters and pulled in $140 million worldwide. For Stephen, the film was meant as a grand finale, a way to close the story on his own terms. At the height of its popularity, SpongeBob was more than a cartoon. It was a phenomenon, powered by the quiet marine biologist who had once handed out comic pamphlets to a handful of fifth graders. By 2004, the pressure inside Nickelodeon's offices had reached a breaking point. SpongeBob's yellow face was everywhere, on cereal boxes, sneakers, and plastic toys that Stephen Hillenburg never wanted to see washed up on a real beach. He once admitted that his biggest nightmare was that he was going to be responsible for a bag of plastic floating in the ocean, and that it would be his legacy. Behind closed doors, the network pushed for more episodes, more products, and a wave of spin-offs that Stephen refused to approve. Internal memos from that year show Hillenburg's growing frustration as executives insisted the show continue past the movie, despite his intention for it to be a natural endpoint. He resisted, arguing that the spirit of Bikini Bottom would be lost in endless expansion. In late 2004, Stephen stepped down as showrunner, handing the reins to his trusted collaborator Paul Tibbitt. He stayed on as executive producer, but withdrew from day-to-day decisions, hoping to shield what he had built from the forces that threatened to hollow it out. In March 2017, Stephen Hillenburg released a brief statement through Nickelodeon, sharing that he had been diagnosed with ALS, a progressive neurodegenerative disease. The words were simple and direct. He explained his condition, thanked fans for their support, and made a quiet promise. He would keep working on SpongeBob SquarePants for as long as he was able. Friends and colleagues recall that he never wanted pity. Instead, Stephen focused on the work, showing up in the writer's room, reviewing storyboards, and offering gentle corrections, even as his health declined. Production records confirm his involvement in episodes like Pineapple RV and Goons on the Moon, which aired during his final year. Each script carried his signature blend of oddball humor and precise marine detail, even as the effort became more taxing. On November 26, 2018, Stephen Hillenburg died at age 57 in Burbank, California. The news rippled through the animation world and far beyond, but the show he created continued, echoing the spirit of the scientist-artist who refused to let illness define his last chapter. Today, SpongeBob's laughter still echoes across generations, but its heart, the mind of a scientist, artist, and gentle rebel, is gone. As the brand grows, Hillenburg's quiet stand for creative integrity feels more urgent than ever. The sea he loved keeps his secret, but the world keeps his wonder.